Tonight's speaker is Stewart, and just a couple of fun facts about him. Is born and raised in Dayton, right? He's been at UD for 13 years. 13 whole years.
A lot of graduating classes.
So if you have any questions, I'm sure he's seen many students come and go on to great things in life. He is a huge Oakland Raiders fan. Burns down on that. He thinks that.
I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, no one else.
It's kind of sad, but we'll get there.
He thinks that Batman is the best superhero of all time. If you'd like to debate, you can see him afterwards.
If you're not going to win, you can try to debate.
And then his favorite Ninja Turtle is Donatello.
Donatello.
So without further ado, Stewart, everybody.
So no other Donatello fans. Thank you, in the back. No other Batman fans? You're a Marvel person? Get it together. I like Marvel too. And no other, did I say Oakland Raiders? No Oakland Raider fans? No. That's okay. I love you all anyway. So how's everybody doing?
Great.
Good? I hope you're okay with the fact that I have a lot of energy. Is that okay on this cold March day? I have it. I'm going to spread it all to you. My name is Stewart, and the very first thing I want to say is that I love myself. Okay? I want that to sit with you for a minute. I love myself. Say that with me. I love myself. No, you're supposed to say you love me. Not that you said. But I want to really get into that and why that means so much to me, and how it really pertains to my faith journey and my faith walk. I love myself is something that people don't say enough. I think understanding the fuel that could possibly give you and how you navigate life is a lost art, right? We need to say, I love myself more. So, I do want you to repeat this for real this time. And I do have notes, okay? Anything worth doing is worth having notes for. So I care about you enough to have some notes, all right? So repeat this for me. I love myself.
I love myself.
Even though I am imperfect, God created me and has a purpose for my life.
God created me and has a purpose for my life.
Which is why I'm allowed to wake up every day. And this is what makes me perfect. Because you are both perfect and imperfect at the same time. It's a little confusing, but I really truly do believe that based on who we are, based on the fact that God has believed in us, we're imperfect, right? We know that. But the fact that God believed in us enough for us to be here, I believe honestly makes us perfect, right? So I navigate life that way, perfectly through my imperfections. That's pretty cool. You should circle that and highlight it. Put it in your pocket. So, I'm excited to share my story with you and talk just a little bit about what we bring with us. What we bring with us are our experiences, right? So in life, we've had a tremendous amount of experiences. And those experiences allow us to carry baggage, right? Now, we think of baggage, it gets a little bit layered in our minds when we say the term baggage, but I honestly do think it's an honor. I think the experiences that we've had, the things that we picked up, the way that we've been socialized, it attaches things to us, right? It makes us navigate situations certain ways. It makes us navigate problems. It makes us really understand our successes, good or bad, right? It's part of that baggage that we carry with us. But sometimes the baggage that we carry is heavy, and it can slow us down. We know that to be true, right? How many of you carry book bags? Who thinks they could win the award? Who thinks they could win the award for the heaviest book bag on campus? Raise your hand if you think so. You're in the mix there. You're in the. I've worked with students for many, many different years, and I've watched them, and their bags are so heavy, right? Because you're carrying around your OChem books, or whatever that class is. I know it seems to be very, very terrible for students. You're carrying around your encyclodictionaries. It's like this big, right? But as heavy as those bags are, how necessary are those bags? Would you say they're fairly necessary? Yes, they are. They're necessary. Right? You know you need them. You got to go to class. You need your books. Sometimes because of the journey you have throughout the time in a day, not being able to go back to your room, you have to carry all of your books. Right? And even though it weighs you down, when you're in that class and it's part of the solution that you need to listen, to process, to hear the teacher, you have to pull it out and take those notes. So it's a necessary part of your journey is to carry that bag with you, right?
Right.
In life, it's a little bit different because in college, you have to carry what you have to carry. But I honestly believe in life, you get to choose what you carry with you, right? Based on the experiences you have, you get to choose. We don't always figure that out. There's a lot of people who don't figure that out. So what I really want to talk about is my story and how I figured that out for myself. How I figured out what I carried with me. I was born and raised here in Dayton, Ohio, which I think is the greatest city in the world, partly because I was born here. But a lot of it has to do with, my wife knows this, my wife is over there. She knows I love Dayton. It's wonderful. I wanted to come back here, and a lot of it is because a lot of my fondest memories are here in this city, right? Even though some of my toughest memories are also here. So I was born and raised on the west side of Dayton in 1979. Might be one of the oldest people in this room, maybe the oldest. I don't know. But I was born in 1979 here in Dayton. Life wasn't easy. So I was a little guy trying to navigate, trying to figure out who I was. I was born into a situation where my parents weren't married. I didn't have a father. And my mom, probably once I got to around 8 years old, she got addicted to drugs. So I'm navigating life as a young man with 3 younger siblings, and there were spurts of complete weeks where I didn't see my mom. I didn't even know where my mom was, but I was just there, you know? My siblings were there. We were all kind of fending for ourselves, trying to figure out how to, you know, put this puzzle piece together. And this went on for a very long time, right? I was put into situations where there was extreme violence. I was put into situations where crime was right in my face. And that crime, sometimes I took part in, right? I can honestly say I wasn't always part of the great solutions that I see in life. That was my reality. You know, I was blessed enough to have grandparents who came into my life and assisted in raising me to kind of pull me out of those situations. But even in those situations, I still struggled with who I was. I still struggled with violence and crime and anger, right? And these layers and these levels of things that was weighing me down. Fortunately, I went to high school. I began to be just a little bit better. I began to pick up things a little bit better and process things just a little bit better. I went to college. The same thing happened. I started to get a little bit better. I started to have a deeper connection with my mother, who I'm happy to say is clean. She's actually off doing really, really great things and speaking her truth and working in her testimony in servicing people who are actually also addicted to drugs. But I struggled for a very, very, very long time about how I show up and who I'm supposed to be. I was very angry. I was very frustrated. But there was a time in my life where I started to really reflect upon who I was. Throughout that entire time in my life, I had never been to church. I had never stepped foot in a church. My wife is here. If she wasn't here, I would say this. She knows. First time I ever been to church is when I met her. Met her at 18. She took me to church. From that point on, I kind of never looked back, right? So I started to understand a little bit more about who God is. And at that time, in my reflection, you know, we talk about critical evaluation of our times on campus and all that good stuff. And even at that age, I'm thinking, wow, I didn't know God, but God knew me throughout that time. I thought about how God was giving me his grace in those moments of my life when I was youngest, right? Because I'm still here, because I was still breathing, I still had to navigate situations. And it really helped me fix, and it gave me the fuel to successfully navigate to the point that I am now in my life, right? So those situations, I won't go into the extreme detail of all those situations, but what they did do and what they did create was the baggage of depression, the baggage of worthlessness, pain, fear, anger. I had dealing with my mom, having to assume some sort of responsibility with my siblings at a young age. I didn't meet my dad till I was 24, right? All of that weighed me down. I was carrying that baggage everywhere that I went. I carried that baggage physically, right? I went through a depression where I gained 100 pounds in a year. And I carried that with me. It was on my back, right? So not only was it, symbolic and metaphoric, it was actually literal. I was carrying the baggage. And for me, something had to click. Something had to stop. And after I really started to understand who God was in my life, I decided to replace that baggage, right? I decided to not take those things with me everywhere that I went, because you didn't want to be around me at that time. You ever been around people, and don't raise your hand if this is true, that kind of sucks the air out of the room when you're close to them? I was one of those people, and I didn't want to be that person. So I decided to say that's not who I'm supposed to be, right? I know that's not who God wants me to be. And I figured that out very young. I tried to release a lot of the anger and the resentment that I had for my mother at that time, and I did. I love my mother dearly. She is a true champion, a personification of a true champion. And I decided to replace those things that I was carrying with me, that depression, that anger, that frustration, that fear. And even though those situations created that for me, I decided to say, you know what those same situations created for me? It created resilience. It created persistence. It created self-efficacy. It created an independent spirit. It created a love in spite of. I can truly say that because of those experiences that I've had, and because of how I showed up to people, when I realized that the people who were closest to me, who loved me even though I was woefully broken, I said, those are the type of people that I want to be like. So what I did was I said, you know what, I'm going to treat people like that. I'm going to do my best to treat people like that every day of my life. Because God put something in them to not treat me like a throwaway person, even though I felt like I was a throwaway person. Right? So now I carry with me that love. Even though those situations could break people and it could weigh you down to the point where you feel like you have nothing else, it could also create that manifestation of love and resilience, like I said before, empowered and feeling empowered because I'm still here, right? And once that clicked for me, it was really life-changing. One of the examples that I have of this was when I was dealing with some of the most anger. One of the last things that I had to get rid of was anger. I kind of had come through depression. I had come through a lot of the fear that I had. Still had some, but I had a whole lot of anger going through high school. And even though on the outside I was this happy guy, I was voted best personality, all these things, I had tremendous anger in my heart. And I was mad at myself, I was mad at the world. I played football, and what helped me play football was the amount of anger that I had inside of me. So I was captain of the football team, was first team all-city. I was a big-time football player here in the city of Dayton. So I'm just thinking I'm definitely going to college to play football. Not going to do anything else. That's what's most important to me. That's the thing that gets me through in life, right? That is what I really felt like kept me sane and kept me alive. And I think God put that in my life for me, because it did keep me sane. It kept me out the streets and it kept me alive. By the time I got to college, I went to Wilmington College, and I'm a proud fighting Quaker, believe it or not. I don't know if you figured that out. Proud fighting Quaker. I went there to play football. I said, I gotta play football. This is what I need, right, in my life. But I was better. I could not have told you that there was going to be a Carlos without football. So I went and played. I went on the team. I was on the team. And if you don't know sports, in college for sure, the hardest time is like 2-a-days, right? Where you're practicing like 2 to 3 times a day. It's really, really crazy. Went there, went through all of 2-a-days. Was hurt. My body was sore. I was sweating. All these things were happening. I'm like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm feeling, but something's not right here. By the time 2-a-days was over, I got through the hardest part of 2-a-days. And right before, we were about to start, we took the team picture. I'm in the team picture, everything, right? Best season that school ever had. We were 9-1 that year, right? And I quit. I went into the coach's office and I said, I need to quit, right? And I didn't know what was going on. I was trying to really interrogate my feelings around this. And I prayed about it. And I really thought, and I talked to my then girlfriend, who's now my wife. We were high school sweethearts. Right? And we talked about, she remembers this, we talked about this. And I really, really, really think that God said, you put away this anger that you had in your life. You put away this frustration and this depression that you had in your life. So you don't need football anymore. Right? I need to remove this, take this out of your bag, because I need you to replace it with something else. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I said, what am I going to do? I'm here at college. I don't really have an identity without football. Right? I instantly became an RA, which is amazing. I've been working in higher education now since then. I never stopped. I have 2 degrees. Both my degrees are in criminology. I have a bachelor's in criminology and a master's in criminology, right? It's not connected to being res life. I kind of say I'm preventing you all from being criminals, but some of you end up still being. I hope you don't. I'm sorry, I don't want to put that on anyone's life. Some of y'all need to get it together. But really, in life, that is something that I know was transformative in my spirit. Because even the story of how I became an RA, I didn't want to do it. I was struggling with myself and confidence. I had the RA application was ready. I procrastinated and didn't do it. I had a female mentor, one of my best friends in college. She came to me and said, you'd be a great RA. I said, really? And I didn't fill it out. Let the deadline pass. She came to me and said, no, you need to do this. I said, it's too late. I sabotaged. I can't do it. She said, nope, fill it out. Let's walk over to the office. Filled it out, walked over to the office. They interviewed me right then. Thought I'd be great. I said, cool. If you know about being an RA, you got to wait a whole year, go through training, and then you're the RA the next year. Right? This was around August. This was around August, September. So they hired me. I got the job. I was like, wow, look at God, right? December came, like 5 RAs got fired over the winter break. They ended up hiring me to be an RA for the next semester without training, right? Without anything based on what they saw in me. That spirit, right? That energy. I was carrying something different with me. That was, to me, the confirmation in that overwhelming aha moment in my life to say, God has a different plan. And it all had to do with what I chose to carry, right? Through all of that, what was so awesome to me was that I felt like at certain points in my life, and I had never felt this before, I was never cognitive of this before, I felt God smile. And if you haven't had that experience, I would say do your best to work on your faith relationship and your personal relationship with God so that you can feel when He smiles. You can feel when God smiles at you. And once I figured that out, once I figured out that God smiles at me, once I figured out that I had God's grace, once I truly figured out that I was worthy of His grace, I felt like I could do anything. So my truest self-worth and my truest self-efficacy was when I really truly believed that God loves me. And I didn't know that up until maybe I was, probably the first year of grad school. That's when I truly believed that God loved me, even though He loved me all along. So I carry that with me. I put that in that 1,500-pound backpack that y'all carry. That's what I added to that, right? And I use that for my fuel and how I navigate relationships and interact with people every day. I'll tell you another quick story on how God works. I wasn't raised by my biological parents. My wife wasn't raised by her biological parents. She has a very similar story to me. And we knew that when we entered into our union together. We knew that God had placed people in our lives, that loved us unconditionally, that weren't our biological parents. So we made a decision. And we knew the decision was going to be life-changing for us and a blessing. So we decided to adopt a beautiful baby boy. Say hi, Michael. 11 years ago. And I truly believe that we would not have been prepared, ready, if we could not be in touch with the experiences that may have been heavy experiences, that made us carry certain things, but eventually we said we have to turn this around, right? And put in the good stuff that gives us the tools necessary to be the best parents we can be for my baby boy. He's not a baby. And every day that I look at him, though, I know, I believe, and there's no question that God smiles on us. Because He's one of my heroes. To watch how he navigates life as a young man who doesn't look like his parents, and he has to go in circles every day and still come home and smile and say, I love you, Daddy, I love you, Mommy. That's the stuff that heroes are made of, right? So, you saw the flyer. There's a bunch of things on the flyer that have, and my hair is a little funky on the flyer. Whoever made that flyer with my hair, you did a great job, I love it, but there was a lot of jokes thrown at me. Now, I will say my flyer, I like it a little bit better than Chris Ram's flyer, but I'll take it. That flyer was excellent, I love it, I cherish it always. But you see the things like the superhero that I put in there. You heard the story about Batman, right? One of the things that I used when I was youngest and I was going through the hardest times, even though I was from an area that was full of violence, was that I read comic books every single day. That's what I had to take my mind away. Fell in love with the Oakland Raiders. That represents football for me, right? God is there. God is always present. My family, I take that with me everywhere that I go. I take all my experiences. I went to St. Clair Community College for a year, transferred to Wilmington College. I did my master's work at Eastern Michigan University. I carry all of that with me everywhere that I go, because I look at those, and even though some of them were birthed out of situations that were a little tumultuous, they were fuel. It ended up being fuel and what I needed to keep myself going, right? So I carry that with me, along with God smiling on me, along with my love for you all, along with believing that I'm the greatest person on the earth, but along with also treating you like you're the greatest person on the earth, right? It gives me that fuel. So I wanted to say this. Life is a perfectly designed journey. And while God is the narrator, God has made sure that each of us are able to have the perfect amount of agency over this journey. My question to you is, what are your tools? Right? What are the tools you use based on your experiences you've had in life to lighten your load as you progress through this journey? So let me ask you this question. How much does a million pounds of bricks weigh? $1 million pounds, right? How much does a 1,000,000 pounds of helium-filled balloons weigh? 1 million pounds, right? They weigh the same amount. If you carry around a 1,000,000 pounds of 1,000,000 pounds of bricks, what's going to happen to you? Probably be squashed on the ground, or you'll sink. Can you imagine walking through sand? Imagine walking through a beach with 1,000,000 pounds of bricks on your back. You're not going to get very far. It's going to be like quicksand, right? Right? Now imagine your goal is to soar for the skies. And you walk through that same beach with 1,000,000 pounds of helium balloons. What's going to happen? You're going to be like the house from up. You're definitely going to soar. You might not want to go that high. But the point is they weigh the same. One's going to weigh you down completely. One's going to fill you up, lift you up, and hopefully get you to where you need to go. So my charge ultimately for you is to really, really think about in your life, where has God gracefully positioned you, and how has God gracefully positioned you? The experiences that you've had, good or bad, reflect upon what they mean and how they've been impactful for you. Think about the things that you picked up from those situations and how you carry those things into spaces that you go in, and really reflect upon whether those things fuel you or not. Because if they don't, you have to drop it. And you have to refill. You have to refill your bag. You have to refill your bag. Because whether you believe it or not, whether you know it or not, and hopefully you're here because you do know it, God loves you, and He is smiling on you. And He has gracefully positioned you to where you are right now. And He's gracefully put you in situations that you've experienced. And He wants you to carry the things that fill you up. So that's it for me. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time.
So now we'll just have a very kind of informal Q&A session. So if there was something that Carlos shared that you wanted to talk more on, or you just have a different question for him, feel free to raise your hand and go ahead. Since we're like a smaller little crowd. Yes.
Say your question really loudly.
Yeah, state your question really loudly. Because we have Megan from Flyer Media in the back, who's recording this for everyone. So.
Hi, Megan.
Oh.
Like your NASA shirt.
All right, so anyone has a question?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay. So, do you ever find yourself like discouraged from loving people all the time? And if you do, then how do you like work through that? Because I try to do the same thing, but sometimes,
Yeah,
it gets hard.
it does. I can honestly tell you that I don't.
Well, okay.
But I did. So I don't because I practice and I work at it, right? So the question really is that I could, but I do make it a point as much as I can. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't get triggered by people. It doesn't mean that people don't frustrate me, right? So I think that sometimes in our mind we can't speak in absolutes. We can't think in absolutes.
Right.
So I think the challenge for myself is to not let what someone does that would make me dislike them, don't let that define that person. So I may be extremely frustrated with someone and what they do. But I try my best to say that's not who they are. They're still somebody who God breathed life into. So I'm still going to do my best to say, I love you anyway. I might not want to be around you, right? Because all of that just because you love them doesn't mean you have to be in their presence. It doesn't mean that you have to talk to them every day. But it does mean that, hey, if the car stops on the road, you're going to stop and give them a jump, right? Like stuff like that is like in my mind. And ultimately, you come stay at my house and use my bathroom. Like that sort of stuff I'm still okay with, right? So you have to sometimes redefine what love and like means.
Yeah.
doesn't mean the same as being triggered. People can irk you, people can frustrate you, and sometimes you got to push that away, but it doesn't mean that you push away their spirit and their energy, and that's where I feel like I won't ever do, right?
Yeah.
I'll never do that. So that's kind of where I am.
Yeah.
But I think you'd have to kind of, in your mind, separate the person from the thing that they do that frustrates you. Hope that answers you.
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Very well.
Like I said, feel free to just like raise your hand if you have a question.
Yes.
I have a similar question, like along those same lines. Do you ever get frustrated or feel down about the fact, like if you're loving everyone so much all the time and not having it return to you, like they don't return the same love back?
So I really don't want to sound like I have it all figured out, because I don't, but I really don't. I think that that's not why I love people, right? It's to get it back. It really isn't. Now, sometimes I am very like, when I'm at my worst, I would say, you can figure like, that would be kind of cool, but ultimately it's like, I think sometimes you do your best to figure out, why am I really in a love relationship or a caring relationship with someone? Is it that they reciprocated? Most people would say yes, and that's normal, I think, right? But sometimes it's just because God told me to, right? It's not because there's anything that I expect from you. It's because this is how I'm supposed to treat you, and this is how I'm supposed to be with you. Sometimes you ever been out with somebody who needs something on the streets, who asks for money, and sometimes you don't give money because you're like, all you're gonna do is go buy drugs, go buy alcohol, things like that. Sometimes I give because I feel like I'm supposed to give, not because I care what you're gonna do with it, right? And I think that's where that mindset comes from sometimes. So I do my best to do that, but it does get hard, because you want that reciprocation when something happens, and you want to feel that way. And sometimes it's important to have that conversation if you know that it's not happening, especially if someone is very, very close to you, and it's someone that you really care about, and you know that you're giving it. Because sometimes how you want to receive it back, they don't have the capacity to give it that way, So you have to have that question and really kind of work that out. Or sometimes they do give it back their way, and that is all they have. And sometimes you got to be okay with that, right? So you have to define what their love back to you means, because it's not going to look like your love to them all the time, So sometimes thinking about that is important. Is that helpful?
That's a great answer.
Thank you. That was an excellent answer.
Just thought about it right now.
Great and excellent means the same thing.
What about understanding?
It was an understanding response. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Thank you both. Anyone else? Yes.
So you have this master's degree in criminology, but you've been working in higher ed
Yes.
since you were in RA.
Yes.
How did that, can you go into a little bit more detail of how you graduated with a master's degree,
Yes.
but you still pursued this career?
So after I became an RA, my major was criminal justice. I still loved it. The reason why I chose that major was because I told you about my life growing up. I wanted to know why people chose to leave the life of crime. I wanted to be in prevention. That was the thing. I wanted to work with young people and doing prevention, like telling them my story. I didn't really want to be a police officer. I didn't want to work in the prison system that way as a correctional officer. I wanted to be in prevention. But when I became a student leader, I picked up so many tools that I felt like this is probably what I'm supposed to do. There wasn't a major at that time for student leadership in undergrad. But then I went to grad school. I did my master's level in criminology. I still was in love with it. I didn't do college student personnel. I went to Eastern Michigan. It was one of the best experiences I could have ever made. Had a mentor there. His name was Michael Stark. He was my super advisor. He was my supervisor at that time. First year I went through, I was still doing criminology, but I was actually a grad assistant for housing and residence life. So I was like an area coordinator, a resident coordinator, supervise RAs and things like that. By my second year working with him, as my supervisor, he said, "You would be really good at this." And I said, "No, I don't know." By the time I graduated, I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Because of the experiences I've had at Eastern Michigan. I actually stopped, and then after I got my degree, I worked there for 2 years as an area coordinator. Had some of the best staff members that I could ever ask for. They basically confirmed that this is my life, right? That this is what I want to do. So it was kind of the combination. It was a true vocation, right? I know this is what this is about, is vocation. I figured out what my passions were, but I still had my true love of criminal justice and criminology because that was more tied to my life and my childhood. It was almost like it was the true marrying of my past and my future, right? Because this was the other phase of my life. So I can always fall back on that criminal justice degree, and I always go back and think about theory. I've taught a class here in criminal justice. That was important. But then the other side of it, was moving forward. And that's what Res Life and higher education, and I've been here for 13 years. I've worked in housing and Res Life. I was the area coordinator for Stewart. I actually moved over to campus programming. I advised Campus Activities Board for about 4 years and working with their students in those leadership areas. And then I moved over to Office of Multicultural Affairs, where I love the work that I did there. Now I work over in advancement, right? Raising funds for you beautiful people. And that's really what it's about. So thank you for that question. Yes, can we go there and then back to you? That's good.
I guess sort of along the same lines, like what are some of the balloons, if you will, that you have found from like working in higher ed and like working with students?
Some of the balloons?
Yeah.
There is a true joy in knowing that I'm helping to impact the people that's going to run the country someday, that's going to run the world. At this age, right? I know that that's what's going to happen. Some of the most brilliant people that I've ever met have been the people that's here. And the fact that I can say, okay, as a first year student, a student comes in, I'm able to help impact them, love on them by the time they're a senior, to watch the growth that's happened, and to know that this person is going to go out and I'm putting this out there in this atmosphere. They're going to run a country. They're going to run. They're going to maybe be the president of the United States. They're going to run a Fortune 500 company. They're going to be in charge of hiring people. They're going to be in charge of service. They're going to be in charge of just making someone else's lives better. The fact that I get to be a part of that, it warms me up, right? So that's what I love most. It's been life-changing for me. It's the reason why I know I want to do this work for the rest of my life in some capacity. And there's many different levels of that, right? There's high school level, there's education, but it's the art of working and the love of working with people and working for people in service of people at this level, because it's constant learning as well. And at this university, I've been able to be my authentic self. I am who I am. I'm unfiltered. I don't have many inhibitions. I say things that sometimes I'm like, I go back and be like, did I really just say that? But that is myself. Like, that's who I am. And I've been able to show up, for the most part, being that person. That's why I love being here. Thank you for that question. Yes.
As someone who's grown up in Dayton and has seen a side of the city that not a lot of UD students are privy to, I guess how do you share that with students who may not necessarily understand it, and then B, what do you see for the city of Dayton and how it's improving, or what needs to be fixed, or that kind of stuff?
I think that, so I'll say your last question first.
Okay.
I think that Dayton has some of the richest history of any city in the nation, and people don't know that. So there should be a lot of pride in this city. The first professional football game ever played was here. Talk about this all the time. A lot of people don't know
Dayton
that.
Triangles.
Dayton Triangles versus the Columbus Panhandles. Dayton won, Panhandles, believe it or not, Dayton won 14-0. That was the first NFL game ever played, right? We got Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We're the birthplace of funk music, right? You talk about funk music across the land. Dayton is very influential there. The ice tray was invented in Dayton. The electric starter was invented in Dayton, right? We used to have more patents per capita than any city in the nation. So we had more inventions here than any other city in the nation, right? So for me, I bring that with me. That's part of my baggage. That's part of what I bring in my bag. And the students that know that we argue on a regular basis about Dayton versus Chicago.
I always say my city is well known and it stands on its own.
I don't want to talk about this right now. But we've argued on a regular basis. So really it's about bringing Dayton with me. And when people interact with me, they know that where I'm from, my city, because I talk about it on a regular basis. So hopefully I show them that I'm a representative of that place. I grew up on the west side of Dayton. I didn't grow up other places. Nothing wrong with that. There's no judgment about where people grew up, right? But I grew up there. I grew up in a part of Dayton that was in Drexel that had a lot of issues with race. And then I also grew up on the other side of Dayton that was 99% black, right? And good or bad, those were my experiences. Loved my city. Most of the people that I know love where they grew up, you know? There's not a student who's at this institution that's not from the communities that I'm from, that's not here doing well. They're all doing well. They all love their city. They're all passionate about their city. So I would say go there to experience things, not to study, not to write a paper, right? Because that happens, and we know. But go there to experience just the richness of that city. You want to talk to me? I'll tell you about places you can go to learn about that history. You know, to go places where you can say, wow, this is the Wright Dunbar House. This is one of the greatest literary minds of our entire time from this city. You know, Wright brothers are from here. You know, James Jason McGee is from here. A runner, right? There's many, many other artists. Charlie Sheen, Emilio Estevez, Martin Sheen, they're all from Dayton. Right? All of these people, all of these things are what makes my city great. And then there's me. And I make it great. But that's what I do. I want people to experience that. And there was another one, I couldn't remember. But did I answer both?
I think so.
Maybe. I don't know. That tends to happen. How do I make Dayton better? Thank you. I think the school systems, I'm a product of the Dayton Public School System. My wife is also a product of the Dayton Public School System. I think that there can be some improvement there because the people who live in Dayton are wonderful jewels, just like in any other city, just like in Oakwood, just like in Kettering, just like in Centerville. And they need to be treated as such, right? Especially through education. And this isn't any judgment about the teachers or anybody else because they're people who are doing the best that they can and putting the work in. But there's a lot that needs to be done to help change our educational, entities in the city. So I would say that's what I would really want to fix. Dayton also has issues with food and food insecurity in a lot of different areas. That's on the west side of Dayton, that's on the east side of Dayton, that's a lot of different areas. People, the wonderful jewels that are in Dayton need to be fed, and they need to be fed with healthy food, right? I think that's very, very important for us to really kind of do some interrogation and try to figure that out. So thank you. Anyone else? Yes?
What would you say to someone who is college age and is struggling with what they carry with them? Because you kind of worked through that, so what advice would you give to someone else? You kind of touched on it again, but...
Yeah. Thank you for that.
No problem.
I think this is sometimes difficult, but as much as you can, connect with someone that you can truly enter into a love relationship with and have real conversations about how to make each other better. Because then you'll start to really see, what baggage you're carrying and how you show up. Because believe it or not, the baggage that you carry and it being heavy, even if you don't tell anyone, the people who are close to you, they know. They can tell, right? So a strategy is to enter into a love relationship. And I don't necessarily mean an intimate relationship, right? I mean, some of my best friends growing up in college were people that I was in a love relationship with. There were people that said, you can't go home because if you leave this institution, it's going to affect me and how well I do here. And I felt the same way about my best friends in college, right? So find someone who can be your peers, right? This wonderful table of ladies, I'll use you as an example. Since they've gotten here, they've been together, right? I think that they care enough about each other to say, if one of them says, yo, your baggage is heavy, are you okay, right? Find that peer group. Find those people that basically can help lift you up when you can't lift your own self up, right? And sometimes it's not going to look the way you want it to look or feel the way you want it to feel even. It's not always even going to feel good, but enter into that. Find that person if you can. It's not always easy. You don't always have those options, because by default I would say you have to pray about it. You have to give it to God, and it's very difficult to do sometimes when you think that you're not worthy, So tap into that worthiness. Understand, love yourself. Understand where your grace comes from. And then start to really write down, what are these things? You know, once you're deeper into that phase and you understand that you need to get rid of this baggage, start to write down what that baggage is, right? Start to write down what are the things that I'm carrying. You know, especially if you're here, you know, you heard my story. I had to really do that. I named depression. I named anger. I named anxiety. I named, you know, these things, and I knew where they came from. And I knew I had to release those things. So that's what I tried to do, mark those off. I'm not perfect at all, even though I am perfect. Right? But I know that I'm not done, right? There's still a lot that I have to do, but that was what I needed to do. I needed to name it. I needed to mark it off, you know? Because again, I know that someone else is not always available. That's not always an option. But you have to be in that quiet space. You have to be okay with reflection. You have to be okay with sitting down and being alone and really tackling this stuff. If it's in the mirror, you know, find that quiet place. If it's you have a car, sit in your car somewhere. Go park somewhere, sit in your car. Don't get arrested. Let the police come find you. But sit in your car somewhere where you can, and sometimes turn that music on and think, process. Knock those things out. You know, sometimes that's very, very necessary. Thank you. Sorry, I'm a criminal justice person, so I said arrest. Yes.
So this kind of goes off of that, but in the very beginning you talked about loving yourself.
Yes.
And like I'm working in a high school right now, but I think like at all ages loving yourself is hard.
Yes.
So you just talked about baggage, but how would you suggest to like high school or college students to take that step towards authentically like loving your full self?
So there was a time that I had to go through in high school where even growing up, so I told you my life story, and one of the other things I dealt with was I didn't have a lot of stuff. Wore the same clothes to school, I wasn't clean, all those different things. I was that kid in school. And that fed into me loving myself, right? For me, it was truly assessing and tackling. You know, at some point the aha moment came for me when I started to look back and say, things are what they are. There's certain things that I have control over and some things I don't. The things that I do have control over, I'm going to be my absolute best self. And the other things, I'm going to just pray about and let God work that out. It worked for me. It was difficult, and what some of the young people deal with today is that you get constantly reinforced that you're not supposed to love yourself because of life, because of what the media tells you, because of what a teacher tells you sometimes. So I understand that those are barriers to that, right? But it's hard because everybody's different. So I don't necessarily have the answer for every student, but I would say though, for those of us who are able to love on those, never underestimate or trivialize the impact that you can have by just believing in a young person, right? Telling them and showing them that they are worth it. Not that they are going to have it all figured out, but they are worth it because we pick that stuff up. There are teachers to this day that I know impacted me and changed my life, and I don't know if they know it. There was just small situations, and I was like, wow, this person really cared about me. And there was a change in me, right? So that was part of my journey that helped me really figure things out, and that's what I began to carry with me also, is how can I be impactful that same way? But it's hard because it's so subjective, you know? But ultimately, for young people, even in having conversations and helping them and mentoring them, is what do you have control over? I know you can be better in this way. Your standard is not someone else's standard, so I'm not going to compare you to this person over here and what they're doing. But for you yourself, what are the things that you have control over, and how can you be your best self in this moment? Trust me, you're wonderful, you're great, God smiles on you, be better. And you'll see that start to be transformative in other aspects of their life, I believe. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm a Libra also, in case you were wondering. Yes.
I got a fun question for you.
Yes, I like fun questions.
Oh, why Donatello?
Purple's my favorite color.
All right.
Partly because Donatello wore purple, though. Because when I started watching when I was little, I had a best friend, and we always, it was just him and I. He was Leonardo, And Donatello was the guy who was smart, and I felt like the team couldn't survive without Donatello. So this is real. I mean, this is really why I like Donatello. So when I was younger, this is kind of cheesy. I wanted to be like Donatello because I wanted any team that I was a part of to need me like they needed Donatello. I wanted to be the person who can fix things, who no matter what people can go to, and they know I'm still kind of like that, right? I wanted to be the person that if something was broken, I'm there. They're calling me. A lot of that was because I couldn't really fix myself. So I latched on to Donatello. That was my guy. I even had a ghost cat.
Aww.
That's my guy. That's a great question. I haven't thought about that in a very long time.
Any more questions? All right, let's give it up one more time for Carlos.